So I am Amelia Osterud. I am the branch manager of the Good Hope Library of the Milwaukee Public Library system. And I am here with my colleague.
I'm Amanda McGillivray, and I am the branch manager of the Villard Square Library of the Milwaukee Public Library system.
And we are here to talk about our experience with mixed use library buildings.
So what is a mixed use building? Merriam-Webster would tell you that it is a building that is used or suitable for several different functions. We wanted to share a couple of examples of mixed use buildings and libraries that we have used in the past. Next slide, please, Amelia.
Oh, next slide. I am sorry. There we go.
So the first one is the Algoma Public Library. This is in Algoma, Wisconsin. You can see in the bottom left corner in that photo, there is a door. That door leads to the City Hall. So this building is shared between the library and City Hall. You can see the fun little pictures of the rest of the library. This one is not mixed use in the way that patrons really mix use it. This is used for city staff to get back and forth between the library where there's meeting spaces and the City Hall where all the other functions of the city happen. Next slide. Another mixed use building, the Suring Area Public Library in Suring, Wisconsin, is a mixed use building. This building is they call it the municipal building. It has the library, the learning center, the village offices, and the police department, which is the police department for both the village, and it is a county police department shared space. All of this is within one building. So this is also a mixed use building. Next slide. This is the Hedberg Library at Carthage College in Kenosha. This mixed use building is one large building with the library in it, and then also what they call Donna's Bites, which you can see is number 10 in this upper left-hand picture. Donna's Bites is a restaurant that is within the building that can be used. People can shop and eat there, and then also go take their food into the library. So next slide.
And I will talk about this one. This is the Carroll University Library. And it is also one building with lots of things in it. It's part of a campus, but it includes the library, a coffee shop, the Learning Commons, and within the Learning Commons is the Career Center, supplemental instruction, tutoring, all that sort of stuff is run within the library building. So there's 3 levels to the building. The lower level is the Learning Commons, and the first floor and second floor of the library, and then apparently the Career Center is now on the first floor. So a lot of student services have moved into the library building. Also, you can get coffee and snacks.
And then we get to the buildings that are near and dear to Amelia and I's hearts. This is photos of Villard Square. These are all from right when we opened. Villard is the oldest mixed use space in the city of Milwaukee. We will be 12 years old in October of 2023. We are a library on the bottom, which you can see all the windows across the bottom in that left-hand top picture is the library, and above us we have 3 floors of apartment buildings. Within the library itself, we're just your kind of traditional library space with our meeting rooms and study rooms and our shelving. But then around us is all of the apartment spaces.
And this is Good Hope Library. We are the newest of the mixed use buildings in Milwaukee Public Library system. We opened in July of 2020, of all times. It was not the best time to open a brand new library. We were also the first library to open after the pandemic shutdown of all of the branches. So like Villard Square, it's a similar model. So there are apartments above and actually sort of surrounding the library. There's 2-story townhome apartments on the first level of the apartment section. We have a makerspace, we have a teen area, which are in the lower left-hand corners of the screen. There isn't a picture that I found of the apartments. I did get to go in and look at the apartments before we opened because I was like, oh, let's go see what this is like. But it is the model that MPL has used for the last couple of new branch spaces, and they have partnered with the developer to make part of the building a library and part of it apartments.
And this form of mixed use that MPL does is the one that we're going to focus on because it's the one we're most familiar with.
Correct. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits to having a shared space. So the biggest benefit for us, since our shared spaces include apartments, is basically you have a built-in patron base. So people live above the library, people are invested in the library, and they think, hey, I've had people say to me, I live at the library, this is pretty cool, right? It also really helps encourage more ties to the community. So patrons, again, living within that sort of circle of library space. And the other thing that you get within Milwaukee is part of the hope is that the new buildings were able to help reinvigorate some neighborhoods. So the branches that MPL replaced with these newer buildings were primarily outdated single-use buildings that had been around for a long time, really were not particularly updatable easily. So the idea was that in these neighborhoods, this would help give a new facility, new options, new places for people to go. And also really, I like to think of it like the city is telling the people in the community, hey, we really value you. And we are giving you this beautiful new library as a marker to say, we value you in our community. And this is your community space to use. And it's beautiful and it's up to date. And we've built it just for you, right? The other thing that it does is it helps spread the cost of a new development of a new building a little bit further. So legally speaking, the way that the city of Milwaukee Libraries mixed-use buildings work is that the city owns a condo within the larger building. So this allows the city to own library space and avoid paying on a lease that would have to include basically taxes that the city would pay back to itself, right? To make the complex ownership structure work, the city gave the land to competitively selected developers for free in exchange for receiving square footage, whatever the square footage library condo box, what they call a gray box, they got that in exchange. The city then invested the money in building the library within the space. The developer invested their money in the apartments, and the developer in a couple of cases has also been required to pay for a temporary library location. So a couple of the buildings, so as Amanda said, Villard Square was the first. Good Hope is the most current. There have been two more in between, which are pictured here. East Library, which opened in 2014, and Mitchell Street Library, which opened in 2017. And so East Library, they tore down the old East Library and they built the new building in its place. And so the library had to be temporarily relocated for the duration of the construction, and the developer paid for that relocation space. And that is what is going to be happening with the new Martin Luther King Library, which is the current building MPL is working on developing. So same situation. MLK is in a temporary space currently. It is July of 2023. So while their building is torn down and they have a new mixed use space built in that place. The other things you get, a couple of other goodies, is you get potentially extended community spaces within the building. So potential for the library to be used as a community space when the library itself is not open. I know this is probably a controversial idea for many people. When Good Hope was built, one of the things we talked very long and hard about was making that possible in a way to keep collections and the rest of the facilities safe. And so we have what we call the mall gate. So you can actually roll a metal gate across a section of our building, which you can lock, and it locks the collections and the computers and everything that the patrons would use off from the front of the building, which allows the community room to be used after hours. So basically you'd have access to the community room. and the restrooms. We have not yet we've not used it for anything that way, but the potential is there and it was built with that in mind. For other types of mixed use spaces, like the college libraries we talked about, there's all sorts of opportunities for various partnerships. So coffee shops are sort of a natural. When I was at Carroll, we had Starbucks for a while, and then we had a Canadian company called Second Cup. We were apparently the very first location of this Canadian coffee shop in the nation, which was kind of cool. So it gave the college and it gave the library an opportunity to build that partnership with another entity. You can have the potential for rental income. So East Library has one retail space as part of their mixed use. And so there's, you could build a mixed use building that had storefronts that you could rent. And that could be, depending on what that retail is, it could be beneficial to library staff, library patrons, apartment residents. It sort of depends on, are you hosting a community organization? Are you hosting a store? I was told about a library, I don't remember where, but they had space in the building for a social service agency, like the actual offices of the social service agency. So that was a separate entity within the municipality, but it was housed in the library. So people had a convenient place to go to get those services. And also the library could then refer people, hey, they're right there next door, go and talk to them. So there's a lot of different opportunities depending on what types of mixed use space you end up developing.
Benefits are great, and we love benefits, but sometimes there are challenges that come with having mixed use spaces. And every space is going to have different challenges, but some of the ones that we have experienced that we like to note are things like who's responsible for what? Because you have in our case, we have a condo within a unit. Things like these wonderful window leaks or repairs that need to be or joint systems, who's responsible? So at MPL, we have contracts with all of the organizations that run the rest of the building. So those property management companies, and they're responsible for some things and the library is responsible for some things. And sometimes it's a moment of figuring out who that is. So for example, our window leaks, these big windows, these are the front windows on the north facing side of the Villard Square Library. And there are two of them that when it rains, they leak inside. And I thought, I'm just going to tell our library facilities, they just need to fix the windows. Come to find out, because these windows are external and part of the main part of the building, these are actually our property manager's problem to deal with. So now we are working with the property management company to try to figure out who needs to come and look at them, figure out why they're leaking, and go from there. So it's a little bit longer of a process. So, it's about knowing where those contracts lie and who is responsible for what and when. Another example is we all have joint fire alarm systems, which is great in the essence that if, the apartments above me suddenly start on fire, I'm going to know and we can evacuate the library for everybody to be safe. It is also very annoying that, when somebody above me burns some popcorn in their microwave and it sets the fire alarm system off, we have to evacuate the building because we don't know and our system is just going off. So it's, a learning curve, some challenges there. Another big one is communication. I think Amelia and I talk about this probably once a week. Communication. There are many entities and people who change frequently. In the time I've been at Villard Square for just over 2 years, I have had 4 different property managers for my property alone. So it's constantly trying to figure out who you need to communicate with, when. Is it me who needs to communicate? Is it somebody from our admin portion of the library who needs to communicate this? Is it facilities? There's a lot of communication that becomes a challenge sometimes in making sure that everybody is included who needs to know every moment of the day. But don't let the challenges stop you. It's okay.
All right, so things to consider. So in the time between when Villard Square was built and when Good Hope was built, I will say that MPL did learn a lot. there are still things that I would say you should, if you are embarking on this process, think carefully about how they're structured, how they're handled, what contracts are signed, how there's like how the communication is built. Communal spaces can be problematic. Essentially, you cannot control anyone from using a communal space realistically, right? So we all talk about parking lot issues. Amanda can speak, I think, a bit on parking lot, but I will share my experience in that. So in Good Hope setup, the tenants have their own parking lot. You have to drive through our parking lot to get to it. They have badge access, but they only have one parking space per apartment, which is maybe not enough parking spaces for everybody. So some of the issues we see are tenants parking in the library parking lot overnight, which they are not supposed to be doing. Our parking lot is laid out in such a way that in order to get to the tenant apartments, people drive through the middle of it, nudge signs out of the way, and go through various lanes of parking lot traffic to get to it, often very fast. But so that is the design of parking lot and who has access to your parking lot and who's allowed to park there. I know Amanda's got a couple of sort of legacy parking lot issues that involve previously assigned tenant spaces that are not actually a thing anymore. So you just want to think very carefully about how the parking is structured, sort of think through what problems may occur and how you can work around things to get to the best resolution for everybody. Green space is another one. So with Good Hope, we have a fair amount of green space. It's basically on the plans, it's divided off as to the apartments take care of this green space, the library takes care of this green space, who is responsible for what. So that was, at least the good thing is that was set up ahead of time and it was designated in the original agreement of the building. But then, the library is not open 24 hours a day. Staff are not there 24 hours a day. You have to assume that the library has a little patio in back. It adjoins a tenant patio. The tenants are going to use the library's patio. You know what? It's okay, right? It is a communal space. Like I said, you cannot keep people out of communal spaces. That said, one of the things that is a big difference between Villard Square and Good Hope are access. So entryways, exits, shared garbage. So Villard Square has a shared garbage room with the tenants, which I believe you have the only shared garbage room of the 4 because it was deemed to be not a success. And so with the later iterations of this shared use model, so Good Hope has a shared hallway with the apartments. It is locked. The tenants can't get into the library. We can get into the shared hallway, but we cannot get into the apartments. And so there is shared access, but it is not shared facilities. So there is no shared garbage because Amanda's problem is that everyone then has keys to the shared garbage room, which is not secure.
Which, funny enough, you will see a picture of on the next slide, how we had to fix it with a giant fence so that the library items can be locked off from use from the tenants.
Yeah. Just think very carefully about what the use is going to be, what the access is going to be, who you want to have access to what parts of the building, and then build that access into the plans from the beginning. So yes, we share a fire alarm with the apartments, which is good and bad. You can see the picture here is actually of our shared hallway. It is of a burst pipe in December of last year on one of the coldest days of the year. The alarm went off. We had to evacuate the building. It was impossible to figure out why. Nothing seemed to be on fire until we went into the shared hallway and it was raining water from the ceiling. Something had broken in there. The alarm system, so basically the fire alarm, the water pipes for the fire alarm system had burst. And so we were getting flooding in our mechanical room, which is, as I was going to say, is completely separate from theirs. But so there is a shared space, and that does affect us. But like I said, you want to think carefully about how that access is, and what is actually shared and what is not shared. One of the other things we talk a lot about is security cameras. So the library has lots of security cameras. The apartments have some security cameras. They cover different areas. And that goes back to communication, right? So you need to be able to communicate with whomever is in the property management space at the time. If you've got security issues and you need access to their cameras, vice versa, like how do you handle that? What cameras cover what, that sort of stuff. We get a lot of mail for the tenants. We get Amazon delivery. Sometimes they try to bring DoorDash to us, like, "Ooh, you're going to bring us lunch? Great." But just making sure that everyone knows, okay, if it has this address on it, even though it was delivered to us, it really needs to go to the apartments, and we walk it next door. Security issues, so if there are security issues in the apartments, do they affect the library? Can they affect the library? Absolutely. Again, what is that protocol, and how did you design the space to lessen that as much as you can? And then the last thing is the process for dealing with irate tenants. Just because many of the tenants are excited to live at the library doesn't mean they actually understand who they can talk to about things and who they can talk to about what. So we will occasionally get people who are angry, who are looking for the property management company because they're having a problem with their unit. We have no control over the apartments, but we're there, right? And so in the heat of the moment, they may need someone to come talk to, and we are simply there, and the property management company is not on site. So it, sort of standard, like, okay, know that you're going to be dealing with people who are upset about stuff that you unfortunately have no control over at all, and you can't fix. But they will come and talk to you about it.
They will indeed.
They will indeed.
So through this whole process, there are things that MPL has learned, and Amelia has already touched on some of these. And, things that we've learned, Amelia and I have learned, MPL in general have learned, space needs, such as needing separate spaces. So here is our infamous garbage room. And you can see this giant fence that had to be implemented, and all of the library stuff is on the left-hand side of that fence, and all of the tenant and apartment stuff is on the right-hand side of this fence, because prior to that, things went missing, things got broken. It was just quite the ordeal. So knowing what space needs you need for your library space, and that the whatever mixed use you're putting into your building may need. If that could be, if you're having, a coffee shop put in, knowing what kitchen equipment and space they need for that to make that a legal place, and access to garbage, so that they don't have to, drag their dirty, nasty smelling garbage through every layer of your library. Or if it is making sure that your, public access toilets are accessible. Amelia talked about how when they designed Good Hope, they designed it so that they could close off part of the library to have outside functions. And then they were like, oh yeah, we did that at Villard Square. Your community room can be, because we have doors in our welcome vestibule. So we could unlock just our front door, and they could get into our community room. Great, but they have no access to bathrooms from there, because our bathroom spaces are further back into the library. So you would have to give them access to the full library in order to give them access to the bathrooms. So not really a functional after hours location if you don't want to have staff around to monitor everything happening in the library. And then to think about, that function over design. There are spaces in every library that are beautiful to look at aesthetically. They're wonderful, they're gorgeous, but then as a library space, they're like, this does not make any sense. Why do I have one set of shelves that go perpendicular to everything else in my library, creating this random traffic flow? Does it look pretty? Absolutely. Does it function? Not ideally. So sometimes, speak up and have that function over design moment so that that is there. And then there's also staff needs when you're thinking about a library that includes, security and safety. What do you need for your staff to be secure and safe. At Villard, when they designed us, we have shared underground parking with the tenants, which is fine for the most part, but their emergency exit doors, their tenants use as everyday doors and leave them propped open. And because of this, we have had cars stolen, staff cars stolen from the parking garage. We've had staff cars tires slashed in the parking garage. And it's a safety and security concern that was taken into thought for other buildings about how do we, talk about making sure that doors are secured so that all staff are safe at all times. And then another one is making sure that your team in your building, however it's designed, feels like a team. When they built Villard, it's this beautiful, long, it's the entire length of a city block building, but they put our work teams at opposite ends. So our circulation team works at one end of the building and our reference team at the far other end of the building. And really throughout most of the day, they don't actually have to cross paths for most of what they do, which can sometimes feel very disconnected, like not one team. And they've worked on this. Most of the other buildings are, while not right next door to each other, they're much closer. In Amelia's building, for example, there's just a small hallway in between them with their little kitchen space. And I believe Amelia's office is kind of in the middle of that too, which makes it helpful. So they're more connected. So something to think about as, things we've learned along the way to try to make those teams feel connected.
All right, so I will talk a little bit about our planning process. Planning for a library, if you've been involved in a new building or library addition or library remodel, that part I would say is a fairly standard process. There's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of balls in the air, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. It can be made more complicated when you are also working with another set of contractors who are then building the rest of the building. So a couple of the things that Good Hope saw happen were lots of delays. So one of the first delays actually involved the developer trying to get some tax credits. They didn't get them, and so they had to reapply the next year, which put the entire project behind by a year. The apartments actually ended up being done first. Part of the issues we ran into were sort of the 2020 supply chain issues once we got that far. But just knowing that the communication and the coordination between those construction teams can often lead to delays. So we had delays for whatever reason. The developer could not get the doors in. So as Amanda said earlier, her window problem is the problem of the building owner. The way this works at MPL is the developer builds the exterior and is responsible for all of the exterior. So like Villard Square, our windows, our doors, the decorative trim on the outside of the building, that was done by the entire building's developer, so the shell developer, as they say. And we had no doors for a very long time. There were window issues, and just the massive amounts of communication back and forth between the library and the site developer in trying to get all of this coordinated and done on time, I think was very difficult, and it definitely got delayed. As we got into 2020, there were absolutely material shortages. There were problems. It felt like the longest construction project I'd ever been part of. Like I said, the supply chain issues did not help. It was very, very lengthy and required, I think, more communication and more coordination than just building your own building with your own developer, because you had two sets of contractors, developers for different things. So everyone had to talk. It just leads to delays. So MPL has a position which is actually I can't think of the title off the top of my head, but we have Can you think of it, Amanda?
Project manager,
project manager,
building project manager,
building project manager. So basically, this person is responsible for all of the new construction of all of the mixed use buildings. We had a building remodel a number of years ago, and so they were responsible for that. So they're the person that is the communication person with the developers, contractors, the developer themselves. But they're one person, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that led to a lot of delays. I said we opened in July of 2020. So, but we did all get issued hard hats, which is fun.
And I will second with Amelia with the delays, even while I was not around when Villard was built 12 years ago. I know that, so Villard came to be, first there was a big budget thing and they were going to close a library and it was going to be the Villard Avenue branch, which is actually just down the road from where we're at now, where they built us. And there were protests and the community came together and wanted to keep the library open, and they did, and then they wanted a new space. But the delays kept happening because of those tax credits. It took them 4 years to get the tax credits to be able to build Villard Square before they could build our library. So those delays happen all the time in many different ways.
Yeah. And again, depending on what type of mixed use building you are going into, you may see tax credit issues. You're probably going to see construction delays. I think everyone sees construction delays. But just know that if you've got multiple developers involved, it can be a little bit more complicated. So hang on to your hard hats.
And then, we just want to throw a little bit about managing an existing mixed use library. So while Amelia got to do the fun transition from going from what was our Mill Road branch to the wonderful new Good Hope branch, and do that transition with the building and the move, I took over as manager here at Villard Square in the middle of the pandemic. While it was 10 years old, we were just about to celebrate our 10th birthday. And, having to figure out what it means to take over a mixed use building. Every library I'd worked in before was while in mixed use in some ways, because I was both at the Suring and the Algoma Library, hence why I knew them for the beginning, wasn't the same as taking over here. And there were just some things to know. So there's a lot of unknowns when you get to the mixed use building if you've never done it before. I didn't know who I needed to contact. I didn't know these people's names. They changed frequently, that even previous managers were like, well, that's not who I had the contact information for. So it's just all these unknowns. I didn't know that our windows belonged to the building owner and not the library. I made the assumption that it's a library window. So just being open to learning what those unknowns are and figuring it out and changing with the flow. And then there's what I called the assumed, the things I assumed I knew or that all parties knew. I assumed that everybody knew that our parking lot was the library parking lot, because that's what I was told. This is owned by the library. It's a city parking lot. It follows all city parking regulations, but it doesn't. So that was wrong on me. And so there's all these assumed, the assumed knowledge that you come in with. And every library will be different, every location will be, but just I encourage you that if you're going to take over a mixed use building of any kind, to just be open to the unknowns and to those assumed, and just learn as you go and laugh it off later when you're stressed over it, because you will be, but it's okay, you'll get through it, I promise. And
just ask lots of questions. I think the thing about the windows that Amanda mentioned, I was like, well, of course, I knew that they were the developer's windows. The developer had trouble with them. They weren't ours, but like, why would anyone know that? Right. So just know going in that not everything is going to be as straightforward as it seems. And just, even if it seems like something that you ought to know, ask. It's better to ask.
Just ask. It's okay.
Yeah.
So that's Mixed Use Spaces from Amelia and I. So here is our contact information. We'd be happy to answer any more questions you have. We are not experts on all types or all things, but we'll happily help you out in any way that we can. So please let us know.
Thank you very much.
And then just a thank you to the sponsors of all of this.
There we go.
Thank them for bringing this wonderful presentation to you.